My name's Brian Heffernan. I'm a member of the Taxi Charity for Military Veterans. Last summer, we visited 8 of these veterans of Operation Market Garden, which took place in September 1944. And these are their stories.
My name is Geoff Roberts. I was with the 7th Battalion, the King's Own Scottish Borders. We're all part of the Market Garden operation. I was born in London, Chelsea Barracks, my dad being a regular soldier in the Scots Guards. And when I joined the army in early part of 42, I decided that I'd try and get in my dad's regiment, the Scots Guards. And my second regiment of choice was the London Scottish. But for some reason or other, I didn't pass muster for the Scots Guards. So I ended up in the London Scottish, which is the sister regiment to the Gordon Highlanders. And I was sent up to Perth in Scotland to do my initial training, after which I got posted to the 2nd Battalion of the London Scottish, did my training. And after some bit, they wanted volunteers for Airborne. A load of us put our names down. We didn't hear any more for some time. And then I was then in Yorkshire, in Whitby, and we got a post into the King's Own Scottish Borders, which we found out later that we'd gone as replacement for a glider that had crashed and all the blokes were killed. We didn't find that out till afterwards, so that gave us bags of confidence, didn't it? So from there we did some more training, went to Brize Norton, did our glider training. Although we was stationed at Woodhall Spa, we spent most of the time on the Yorkshire moors doing training. We were then briefed for several different operations, which were all cancelled. But one time we was actually sitting in the glider waiting to go, and it was cancelled. But on the 17th, it wasn't cancelled. And we thought we're glad to be going, but on the other hand, we was a bit apprehensive of what we might find the other end. But what we've been told, that the German troops there were nothing to worry about, you know. And but they got their info wrong, didn't they? But when we actually landed, it was a nice sunny afternoon. We did get hit by a bit of flak going over the Dutch coast. And the chap, I was sitting in seat 28, and Butch Craig, who was sitting in seat 29, he got a bit of shrapnel up through the seat in his bum line. But apart from that, we had a decent landing, and everything went reasonably well up to then. Although we were 3 gliders short, so 75 blokes short, but they came in on the following day. Well, after we landed, we moved off to Ginkle Heath to hold the landing strip for the 4th Para Brigade to come in on the Monday. But unfortunately, owing to bad weather, they were supposed to have arrived at 10:30. They didn't get there till nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But we had a little bit of a ding-dong with the Jerrys. But my particular section was right up on the far side of Ginkle Heath, near Eder, and we were escorted to a 6-pounder anti-tank gun. And we had a lovely view. You could see the stuff moving up and down the road, but they wouldn't let us open fire because they didn't know Jerry didn't know we were there. But in the morning, we was told to open fire, and the first shot took a half track out. And then that's when it started getting naughty. Eventually the 4th Brigade landed. They got down fairly well. And then we moved off again to the farm, Johanna Farm, to hold the landing strip for the Poles to come in the following day. And then during that evening, we had a bit of a ding dong with the Germans, and we walked into an ambush. We was walking down the side. The road was up here. We was walking down the side, and when the Jerry started firing at us, we went over the road down into the woods the other side. And after about 20 minutes, it all seemed to go quiet. It was dead quiet, and the bloke next to me, who I now know to be Sergeant Shaw, he got 2 bullets in the leg. By the time I'd sorted him out in the dark, I was getting a bit worried. It was just the 2 of us on our top. Then I heard Lieutenant Ashley calling to somebody down the road a bit further, so I called to him saying I got the sergeant wounded, couldn't walk. And he came back with Sergeant all right. And they took him out. And Lieutenant Ashley said to me, "You got a grenade?" I said, "Yes." "But what use of a grenade have been in the dark, I don't know." But they pulled out with him, but I wasn't far behind them. The White House, well, the White House was a couple of days later, it was a day later or more, because in actual fact the White House started after the Poles landed with their gliders. That was absolutely chaos, because 156 Battalion powers were pulling through us, but we was behind the railway lines. And the railway line, our side was rather steep, and then top, and then down the bottom. And everybody was trying to get back up this slope. They were trying to take jeeps up. It was chaotic. But eventually I got over the railway. But I can't remember actually moving from the railway to the White House. I just remember being at the White House. And Peyton Reed, our commanding officer, knocked on the door and told the chap we wanted to sort of dig some trenches in his garden and what have you, and he welcomed us with open arms. But a couple of 2.5 days later, the place was a wreck, because the Jerrys, once they found the range, they were, for use of a better word, they were shot on with their mortars. They could drop on a tanner. So they mortared us quite a bit. It's strange. When it was quiet, nothing was happening. It wasn't real, if you know what I mean. You didn't think about that. But once it started getting a bit naughty, sometimes you did, but you hadn't got time to dwell on that. The only time that we were a bit worried was when we got left behind, because we'd heard so many things about what the SS Wallers had done. But I mean, at one time we were fighting the Dutch SS. People have said to me about shooting people, but you don't shoot people. You're shooting a target. It's not a person. It's a target. And if you don't know whether you hit them or not half the time, you know. Yeah, when they decided to pull out of the White House, I left. I was one of the last ones to leave. There was about 5 or 6 of us on a jeep, and the jeep was driven by Corporal Mashingham, and we pulled out of there in a bit of a hurry, and we ended up in Osterbeek village, and we ended in Paul Krugerstrasse. And after a couple of ding-dongs with the Jerrys, I escorted Sergeant Major Swanson, who was injured, into the RAP, and from then onwards someone said, "Are you a stretcher bearer?" And I said no, and they more or less said, "Well, you are now." And we went down to fetch some more blokes in, but the snipers had been pretty good up to then. But then they started getting a bit naughty, and 1 or 2 stretcher bearers had got hit. So we had to wait till nightfall to go and draw them in. Then we found out that there was a parachute and a container in a garden several houses away. But by this time it was pouring rain. And one of the chaps was wearing this gas cape to try and keep dry. But every time we got near a hedge, you never know how much noise a gas cape would make. And we were frightened it was going to wake the Jerrys up. But when we did finally get to the garden, someone had beat us to it. That had gone. So then we came back to the RAP. Then towards the end, we got a message that we were going to pull out. And we were to wrap our boots up in anything we got so we didn't make a noise and tie everything down. And a guide would come for us. But the guide never turned up. Whether he got killed or got lost, we don't know. So we stayed with the wounded. There was a family down in the cellar. And the husband was away in Germany on forced labour somewhere, but the woman was expecting her first child. And so we was looking after them as well. We found this rabbit which was duly slaughtered and put in a copper in one of the outhouses. And the Dutch were very good at preserving vegetables in jars. We threw all that in, made a fair old stew out of it, fed the prisoners and also fed the women down in the cellar. But the thing is that on the 40th anniversary, before this we tried to find the woman and her husband, but they'd moved out of the house. And on the 40th anniversary we actually found them. And we met the daughter for the first time. She was 40 years old. So that sort of made our day, didn't it? After all that time. But that's the house I was captured in. So that was the story of the rabbit. And in the morning, the Germans walked in, the big German sergeant major with two German soldiers. They were younger than we were because the rifles were bigger than they. In perfect English, he said, "For you, the war is over." And he gave us a packet of Woodbine cigarettes. And that was it. After that, we were searched and everything. The Jerrys decided we shouldn't have, they took. And then they took us into Arnhem for to be interrogated. And there's one German that I would like to have met after the war. He was an officer, and he got a speck of dust on him, and he was interrogating us. And he didn't like the way I was talking, he didn't like my accent one little bit. And he said to me, "In Germany, we would teach you perfect English." I said, "I doubt it, but I wish I'd met him after the war because I didn't." And then we were marched to a place called Zepfen, where we were put on the train, and we went to Stalag 12A, and where we were booked in, as it were, like, we got our number, and it was a massive, great prisoner of war camp it was, and talk about stink. There was every nationality on the face of the earth in there. And the Russians were one side, but they were wired off from us. And after spending a few days there, we were sent to Milberg. And then we stayed there for a bit, and then we were sent out to a working camp in Stalag 4C in Czechoslovakia, where we was working down the coal mines. But that sounds a bit horrible, doesn't it? But that was the safest place to be. You should get the RAF come and bombing at night and the Yanks during the day. We always said the Yanks come during the day because they couldn't find their way in the dark, you know. The German guards we got there, they're all old boys, they've been wounded several times, some of them have been in Russia. In fact, the Jerry guard that used to look after us and march us to work, we used to have to slow down when we got just outside work, let him catch us up so he didn't get into trouble, like, you know. When the Russians actually came through, We were at work, but when we got back to the camp, they'd been out scrumping and they got food on everybody's bed, like, you know. But the Russians didn't want to know. They went straight through and told us to wait for the Allies. After about a week of this, three of us got a bit cheesed off. So we liberated some bicycles and we cycled to find the Americans, which we eventually found the Americans. We flogged our bikes for Pack-a-Lucky Strike, and they fed us kit up in American gear. And then after 2 or 3 days, they flew us to Reims in France, and then the RAF took over and flew us home. And when we landed in the aerodrome just outside Worthing somewhere. And all these WAFs come out to greet us, and we thought, oh, this is, you know, bloody nice. They took us into a big shed or something. And where we thought we were going to get tea and cakes and looked after, we were deloused. And I think we was the cleanest bloody prisoners of war ever walked through England. And after that, well, after a bit we were sent on, I think it was 8 weeks leave, I think we had. Sometimes when someone got shot, you probably thought, well, that could be me, because my 2 mates at the farm when the Poles landed, my 2 mates, Corporal Plummer and Private Brown, were in the next trench to me with a Bren gun, and they both got killed. I remember Brown calling out to me, Robbo, Plummer's been hit. And then there was a burst of firing, and then it went quiet, so it was obviously when Brown got hit. And from then on, that's when the panic started, when we're trying to get back over the railway. I don't know if it was the 1st or the 2nd Battalion of the KOSB were still fighting in Burma. And we heard a faint rumour that they wanted to reinforce it, so we thought, well, being the KOSBs, we'd stand a fair chance of going out of Burma. I didn't fancy that. So I ended up, believe it or not, in a military police. They sent us to Reigate and near Red Hill, where we did our police training. They taught us to ride a motorbike. Then I was posted to London. And from there we was posted out to Italy when Tito was getting a bit naughty. And we spent the time out there, and then I got demobbed from there. We came home to York, where I got demobbed in York. What I can't understand is, I don't know whether understand's the right word, but we landed there on a Sunday morning in a prosperous little village of Osterbeek. It was a lovely village, lovely houses. 10 days later, the place was wrecked, a lot of Dutch people killed. Yeah, they still keep welcoming us. Well, I think possibly because they thought we was gone there to liberate them, but I don't know. If we hadn't have come, would they have still been here? But it's difficult. I mean, well, it could have been my kids, couldn't it? If it had been reversed, yeah. But there's 2, I don't know, you've obviously been in the museum. You've seen a bit of wallpaper which is some sort of the Germans. I was in there with, I think it was with Nick or with one of the girls, And these two old ladies, Dutch ladies, were reading this, and they were crying their eyes out. And they turned around and saw me, and they come round. That's when I started. I'm going now. But they'd read that and they knew what it meant. And stupid, isn't it? Little things like that, that's what gets you. Oh. Yeah. I mean, I didn't go on the first return, but that they didn't know what reception to, but they had the same reception as they're getting now. In fact, I think it's more pronounced now than it was then, I think. Well, if it's an adult, I say I'm not a hero because I was just a squaddy like all the rest of them. But it's when the kids, I mean, I don't know if you've seen photographs of me with the kid, have you, but on her back. Well, I met her initially when she was wearing a t-shirt with a "Thank you, Mr." on her back. And then I met her again the last time we went. She's that much older. And she's still wearing the same t-shirt.